great to be here, and there's an extraordinary amount of positive energy in the room and all sorts of wonderful things going on. And I think, as last speaker, I think I should take this opportunity to thank Antonia for organising this.
Thanks for coming, guys.
It's great to be here. So, as I understand, this is all about housing. So I'll try to talk about the experiences in Stokes Croft in that context. Stokes Croft, for those of you who are not from round these parts, is a... This aerial, my bab, is a very deprived, has been a very deprived area. It's also been an area of sedition since the dawn of time. It was governed from a long way away from the main city. It was just outside the city walls, which meant that all sorts of shenanigans could take place that didn't take place, and it had a lack of control compared to the rest of the city. So this photo was taken, I think, in 2007, and it's been at the heart of what the Stokes Croft idea is about, which is about questioning everything. The idea is that, you know, it's almost like a philosophical, political discussion taking place in real time. And the building behind it is Westmoreland House, which is occupies, Keith will know, what is it, about 3 acres or something? And has been derelict for 30 years, been owned by an absentee property developer, and the community has suffered enormously. The Stokes Crofters had massive dereliction since the Second World War, basically. So just before I came up here, Antonia said, "Come on, Chris, rabble rouse." So I will do my best. And as it happens, I'm quite grumpy this week because on Wednesday I went to an auction, and this is for a place called the Magpie that has been squatted for 20, 30 years in Stokes Croft. It had a guy... Sorry? Right next to the building that you just saw. And it has a community, and it has people who live in it, and if we had a different idea of property ownership, perhaps those people would have some stake in it. And we are seeing right here the effects of the national politics and the national economics. It was sold for £300,000 with squatters in it, and this is a property that nobody wanted 8-10 years ago. And it's, in a way, the result of we're receiving now what London has been knowing about for a very long time. And this is systemic. It's because quantitative easing, that's a lie, isn't it? We used to call it increasing the money supply. And we used to, so they thought, we'll call it something else, so people forget what it actually is. And so, one of the things I'm going to be saying to you later is about, actually, when you look back to the 1970s, how the community development stuff happened, it's largely because of that funding that was put in, and look at the knock-on effect. And if you can bail out the banks, then you can be doing funding with smaller organisations. And I think of the Grameen Bank when we talk about the way that funds are used well by smaller organisations. And we have a government that's obsessed with giving all its money to big corporations, and actually we need to completely reverse that trend. So I'm going to do a little whistle-stop tour through the experiences that we've had over the period. Back in 2007, my business collapsed. I moved into Stokes Croft. This was a derelict wall. That's the first thing I wrote on it. At that time in 2007, there was wholesale dereliction. This was what is now Hamilton House, a massive, vibrant community of artists and performers, and is communally run, that provides local food. This was typical, completely neglected. That's another shot of the carriage. All day long, every day, council would be down painting out the tag, and then at night it would be tagged back again. And in a way, that's a discussion of property itself. what rights are, whose rights there are to that, and that's what our last speaker was speaking about exactly. So I painted this wall on our own derelict property fence, and as I was doing it, people kept coming up and said, "Are you allowed to do that?" And I should say, "I fucking well think so, it's our fence." And in that period was the realisation that the role of the state in that area at that time was to stop things happening. And so we joshed about setting up, Passport to Pimlico, the Broadway Ealing comedies and all of that. And so we started to do little things. On that fence, I just put up frames. And this is an area where it was renowned for its vandalism and troublemaking and all of that. And what happened was that everybody just filled in the frames. And that... Then other graffiti artists kept turning up. This one says, "I must not write on walls, I must not write on walls, I must not write on walls, I must not." There's a lot of frustration in that one. And what we used to do is pick out all the derelict spots and paint them, and we thought, and then territory. So we took all the council litter bins, which were all grey and horrible and dirty, and painted them all with what was the PRC colours, with the idea of creating a notion of an entity. And actually, I suppose if you think in terms of property, some notion of ownership, and that doing a bit of something in the space, you start to actually, if you swept your street, you start to think you own that street, and you start to think about it more. They didn't want to do any recycling, so we built our own recycling bins and put them in the street, and they didn't like that. They took them away. And so we did bins that said, these are not recycling bins. And then we started to just knock stuff off. This is the council officers painting out the stuff. This was a cycle that just kept going on and on. And then this was a key moment. We got permission off the property owner, painted that wall. And it's not all the council officers, it's always a few. There was an anti-graffiti team, they painted it out the following day, even though we had permission. So we painted this. Put the name of the person on it, and they were deluged by that thing. Their legal department wouldn't speak to it. They wanted it removed. They used the historic buildings grade 2 stuff about you can't paint them to force the landowner to get it off. So it was kind of war, We got permission to paint this. Here is where there was always tagging. You can see this. That was painted out every other day. And this is a symbol of positive energy coming into the area, and this is all done with no money, almost no money. And then started to take out the signage, take the signage away, repaint it, put it back. So it's actually local community that's made its signage, so it starts to own its space. Addressing social problems in a playful manner. This is an artist from Holland. Couldn't believe that we would be doing this in daylight, because we had no permissions for painting the BT box, but we just said we're doing things really well, and we're just going to do it, and if you want to prosecute us for this, bring it on. So, and it's the perfect site for that, children playing. It's just what you'd like to have on every street corner, to have that message out there. So, so we were finding that there had to be pushback against, effectively, the state that's stopping us doing things. And then Tesco's moved into the area, and this is in an area that's conservation area, defined by its local businesses and all of that. And so the Tesco building was squatted by squatters, and that's a debate about property ownership. And what we saw was that the state protected what I consider robber barons. So we had security coming in, and they basically dragged all the squatters out of there. It was ugly. It was proper ugly, and the whole community was going, "What the fuck? This is not acceptable behaviour." And we went through all the proper procedures, did all of the we don't want it. We did surveys. 93% said they didn't want it. Artists all over the place. We were at the same time we were generating this political. Really, it's just starting to hearts and minds. This is on solicitors that work with primarily refugees and migrants, and we painted that for them because we thought it was important. And we used the skills that the advertising hoardings used to have it, and that still to this day has Think Local Boycott Tesco on it. It's the only place that I know of that's got anti-corporate advertising in this country. And, it started to all bubble up, and it started to bubble up. This is a wall that we painted with antique Victorian stuff, just making the place better. And then this went up, so we thought we'd give it a bit of weight and make it more obvious. And then it became this. So you can see in the people are beginning to feel it. And then this, and then this, and then this. We had the riot police from out of town. We had dogs set on people. We had, in many ways, it reminds me of the 1831 riots that happened in Bristol, where over 300 people were slaughtered on the streets of Bristol by soldiers from Reading. And Peterloo, same deal. And this foment has results. The Manchester Guardian came directly out of the Peterloo massacre, and in our building we now have the Bristol Cable, which is owned by its subscribers as a local newspaper, and is being espoused by the Guardian and various other people, and is a real force for social change. And this all starts with all this argy-bargy. This was put up, we put this up in 2009, so it was completely a big old lie, and we put Bristol City Council's thing on it, and we put it in the wrong place, and it was aspirational, this is where we're going, and that cost 160 quid, and the effect, massive. And at the same time, on our historic buildings, we have a building that's was built by a guy called E.W. Godwin, who was big cheese in the aesthetic movement in the 19th century. So this building, which is the other side of that building I showed you, was derelict, 30 years derelict. And he decorated Oscar Wilde's apartments and all that kind of business. And this was done by local artists saying, we want this place to be a cultural quarter, and this is done in the style of E.W. Godwin. It's absolutely on the money. In the only spaces that are that you can actually get your mitts on are the spaces that nobody else wants. So the Bear Pit is a big sunken 1960s roundabout that nobody wanted. That when Cabot Circus, even the streets were sold to the developers, they didn't want that. They spent £12 million on doing all the surfaces, and they left that. So we went in and we put these boards up, and we started our gallery in these tunnels. And all of this feeds into the consciousness and the psyche of the people. And through the arts, we're doing all this stuff, relentless optimism, that went up. And that's a big stencil, so every time it gets painted out, we paint it back in again. So it's ongoing. This bear is made from bits and bats that are left over by developers, actually. And is right in the middle of the roundabout. It is the symbol of this bottom-up change. So we got a few grand off the Arts Council, and we eked that out. And this is now becoming a major symbol of the city. It's rivaling the bridge. And we blagged to get it painted on the way in front of Cabot Circus. And the way that worked is we got hold of the guy who was working in Western Power, and he was retiring the following week. He said, go for it. And that's how we got that. But where we've got to, and this is about, and I think some of this is, there's all these extraordinary things going on in this room. And, community land trusts, when you tell people about it, they're really excited. And, we've got this whitewash of this blizzard of misinformation that's going on, the neoliberal agenda. And we need to take back our streets, and we need to take back our spaces to put these messages up where people can see them. It's actually, it's a media war, if you like, and with the internet now, we have at least a chance of beginning to get a level playing field. I never thought we'd have a Chomsky quote in the Bear Pit, but we do. And it's just happening. People are just putting the stuff up, and these are all debates. And it percolates out, just as it has with Naomi. Underneath the next junction up from the Bear Pit, local residents just started putting up skate ramps, and the council has now acquiesced in that and is beginning to facilitate it. And this is a 1960s road that was built straight through community, and on the other side of that road is Tesco's and IKEA, who don't give a damn about community. It was actually built on our Greyhound Speedway and football stadium, and even the Rovers Supporters Club, it was stipulated that that was the only thing that should remain. IKEA went to court 2 years ago now to try and get that closed down so they could have 5 more parking spaces. Taking back property. So the Bear Pit was council owned, and it's quite complex because it's in the middle of a traffic system. And a group of community-minded people said, actually, am I going on too long?
5 minutes, go on.
One of the council's retiring officers, he was just about to retire, same deal. We convinced him that it ought to be a community action zone, and so he got all the council officers to say, he said, I don't know what community action zone is yet, but this is going to be one, and we're going to crack on with it. And he instructed all his officers to get behind it. So what that's morphing into is a really interesting space where that debate about what property is and what ownership is taking place. And I keep thinking about a guy called Thomas Müntzer, who was he was the head of the German uprising in 1525. I only know this stuff because I got interested in it. And he died saying, Omnia sunt communia, everything is in common, we all own everything. And I think it's an absolutely central thing to the way we think. And the whole land trust stuff is absolutely central, and the co-op is absolutely central to it. So, we're just pleased that we can get, because, if you go to the BRI up the road, Costa is the first thing you see, because they have done a public-private partnership, and so the price of that is you see fucking Costa as you walk into the thing. So all of this is kind of like a discussion about property and all these concepts around it, and it became increasingly obvious that if you want to retain anything of what remains, because as it got more sexy, because we're doing all this art in public, property prices go up, people want to come in. So and this is a bit where you GCLG guys can listen up. Money, please, for small groups, because if we didn't have 4 angel investors, this could not have happened. And we've got 4 angel investors who have put their money into it, 250 grand. And this building was in a pickle. We've been painting it up without doing anything. It's actually a way of doing stuff. It's like in the style of Hundertwasser, very gentle, not doing very much. We picked these colours so we could defend it, because we keep all those colours in, so the graffiti. And in it, we've got all sorts of sedition going on. Bristol Cabler, we gave them offices for 6 months. We have political meetings and events and all of that. And we generate our own income, so we don't need any money off anybody. And that's the only way we can do all this scary stuff, is because we don't get any money off anybody. We run it off the china that we make. We decorate bone china. And full down the end there is a yard there which facilitates all the doing of it. So it's infrastructure, it's that build it and we will come. If you want to have communities actually doing stuff, and this is absolutely central to the whole green agenda, then you've got to build workshops in your community so they can do it and they can paint it and they can learn how to build that. And then you might build lower and it might not be so grand, but then the people who are in the community have an investment in it, and that's kind of what's happening. I'm going to leave you with that picture. There's somebody taking back some property from the Parks Department in Bristol. Thank you.